Thank you so much for making it to our leadership session. It's going to be a pretty interesting discussion. We've got one of our very great customers, T-Mobile, represented by Warren McNeil, who's going to be taking us through their journey. But before we do that, I just wanted to set the stage in terms of what is AWS doing from a technology adoption, cloud adoption, digital transformation. There are so many acronyms, there are so many names which go around in the industry. But essentially, what we are trying to achieve here is to be aligned to the business challenges that are faced by our partners, our customers in the technology, in the telecommunications landscape. The slide is pretty self-explanatory. Of course, we've all heard about the scale challenge, we've all heard about the agility challenge, we've heard about the cost and the revenue challenge, and then, of course, in every business, there's competitive pressure. Given the fact that telecommunications, the service provider industry, is a very established industry, naturally a mature industry, so the competitive pressure goes to the next level. Simply because, as most of us who've been through the economic classes in MBA, you hear that price is equal to marginal cost in any established competitive industry. So given that fact, there are few technology trends which are significantly impacting the choices that service providers, we think, as AWS, are making today. Of course, there is massive cash flow pressures because they've got to roll out 5G. Big, serious thing. There's spectrum cost, there is 10 times increase in the sites, so that's significant cost pressures, working capital pressures. And that's driving asset rationalization. And there is a significant rethinking going on within the telecommunications industry as to where do they really need to invest their money? Where do they really need to invest their working capital, whether it's, and I'm not talking about CapEx versus OpEx, I'm just talking about where does the money get spent. And then, of course, we are hearing about connected vehicle, we are hearing about massive IoT, mission-critical IoT, you're talking about precision surgeries, robotics, humanoids. What does it mean? That means millions? No, billions of devices being connected. And that connectivity is not only a matter of spectrum or bandwidth. That connectivity is a matter of orchestrating, being able to orchestrate billions of devices simultaneously, on demand, dynamically. And that's what the real challenge that the operators face today. And last but not least, that the whole automation piece doesn't get only extended into the IT, in the extended IT world of the world, but it extends from enterprise IT into the network IT and all the way into the network infrastructure. So with that being said, why is digital transformation, if we take that as the ultimate objective of any service provider, why is it important? Of course, we're talking about growth. There is new revenue streams. That's extremely important because we've all heard about, thanks to even, we are accused, players like AWS, about OTT and some of the other stuff. But then that new revenue stream has a direct correlation with the ability to innovate, and the agility and the speed at which we innovate. And then that agility and speed also directly impacts the profitability of the service that you are eventually going to launch. Because whether you're talking about price elasticity testing or getting to the right price point, you have to do that while you understand your customer needs. So all of this put together, we believe that going digital unlocks the significant business value for our customers and for our partners, the telecommunications service providers. And that is why, in a nutshell, we, as AWS, are using a four-pronged strategy to enable the service providers of tomorrow, transforming from being a communication service provider to being a digital service provider. From a CSP, the journey from being a CSP to being a DSP, a digital service provider. We want to accelerate the digital transformation and data center consolidation. That's significant efforts that we've undertaken with various service providers across the world and that we are accelerating. You heard yesterday about something which is wavelength. That's something we've been working behind the doors for quite some time. And the whole idea is really how to help operators monetize 5G. You heard about the value pools. You heard about creating different currencies and Andy Jassy's keynote. That's exactly what we're doing. The service providers, they control the 5G wireless connectivity. We are helping them create a new value pool, which is the edge cloud. Because the latency on the radio interface is one thing, but what applications need is latency of processing. And that's only going to happen once you have cloud services right down to the edge. We're working with a customer experience journey. We've heard a lot during the reInvent about our progress in AI ML arena. And we believe across an omni-channel experience, using AWS AI and ML capabilities, we can significantly enhance the customer experience and help achieve higher retention, low churn, and then significantly increase the lifetime value of a customer. So that directly relates into both revenue and profit. And last but not least, it's automation. I mean, process automation doesn't stop, as I mentioned before, at the IT level. It extends into network IT, into your OSS, BSS applications, and then in future, all the way to resource, in the case of 5G, to resource allocation for your network slices. So that's, in short, AWS strategy as to how we are trying to help our customers, our partners, go down this path of digital transformation. Now with this, I'd like to introduce Warren McNeil, who's the Senior Vice President of Technology and IT at T-Mobile, and he'll take the rest of the floor.
Thank you, Amir. You guys hear me okay? Can you hear me? Thank you, Amir, for the introduction. Warren McNeil. I've been with T-Mobile and really had the privilege of being part of the T-Mobile family for the last 20 years, leading product teams, technology teams. Today, what I want to talk about is what has been nothing short of an incredible transformation of a business, of technology, and of culture that has happened at T-Mobile really over the course of the last 7 years. So I'm going to talk about what we've done at T-Mobile, and I'm going to talk about how the cloud has helped us as we've been going along that journey. But I wanted to start off with a cloud story. And in 2015, our marketing group came to us and they said, you know what, we've got a fantastic idea. Super Bowl's coming up and we're going to take a spot. And we thought, yeah, that sounds great. It's going to be great for the brand. Let's get our name out there. Why wouldn't we do that? And I said, why are you talking IT? Why is marketing coming to tell us they're going to take a spot in the Super Bowl? And they said, well, there's a little more to it than that. We want to make this a social event. I said, okay, tell me a little bit more. We want to put Kim Kardashian in the ad, and users can tweet Kim, and then she's going to send a personalized response back. We went out, we got some software, and we want you to implement it. So there's a couple of things. One, I have no idea how many people want to tweet with Kim Kardashian, so I have no idea how big of the scale we're talking about. Two, when a marketing group comes to you with software, that typically raises the antenna a little bit. And the Super Bowl was that weekend. We had 5 days. So think about that. We have 115 million people around the world that are going to be watching the Super Bowl and potentially interacting with our ad. What are we going to do? Well, we run large IT shops. We run large data centers. We're a wireless company. We started looking at our infrastructure, and we said, there is no way we're going to be able to stand this up. Could we go procure it? Well, we could try and procure it. Maybe we could get it racked and stacked in 5 days if we can find it. But it's going to blow the business case up. We couldn't afford it. It wouldn't make any sense. Well, fortunately, a couple of years before, we'd begun working with AWS. It was really the start of our journey into the cloud. So I picked up the phone, got our partners from Amazon. They came over. We started looking at it, and we said, you know what? Yeah, we think we can pull this off. We got the software working. 2 days before the Super Bowl, we stood up 5,000 of the largest instances that AWS had. So if you were trying to get one of the large instances that when the Super Bowl was running, I apologize, it was probably us that was taking it. Super Bowl happened, the ad ran, people were tweeting, Kim was responding, and it worked flawlessly. And I have to tell you, if you're in the IT world, the opportunity to get in front of the business and be able to move and give them what they need in such a fast way, it's game-changing. And it's just one example of how we've used the cloud to help accelerate the T-Mobile business. Let me roll the clock back, though, for just a moment. 2012, where was T-Mobile as a company? How many people remember T-Mobile in 2012? There's a few. But the reason a lot of you didn't raise your hand, because we were struggling. Of the 4 major carriers, we were the smallest. We had about 33 million customers, and we were shrinking every quarter. We didn't have the iPhone. We didn't have LTE. We had the lowest J.D. Power scores in the industry. AT&T had attempted to acquire T-Mobile, and it failed. Now, out of that transaction, we did get $4 billion that we could invest back into the network, but we had a problem. We were stuck in the middle. We had large competitors above us that were attacking us. We had small carriers below us that we were attacking us. We didn't know what we stood for. Why would a customer come to T-Mobile? What were we about? And that was critical for a business at that point in time. So what do you do? What do you do when you're a business and you're under that kind of pressure and you're just not being successful in the market? What would you do? We called Batman. Now, I don't know if you're around the telecommunications industry. That's not really Batman, okay. It's John Ledger. John was the CEO that was brought in about 7 years ago to lead a change in the company. And I remember the first day that he showed up, we held an all hands. John came in and he said, look, it stops today. And we're like, who is this guy? He's got a suit on, took his suit coat off. Last time I've seen him in a suit coat. Starts to dress like that. But he said, it stops today. This view that we can't win in the market. We can win, and we will win. We're not a shrinking company. We're going to be a growing company. And that began what was an absolutely incredible journey. We merged with Metro PCS shortly after John came on. We acquired the iPhone, the one phone that everyone wanted, and we were the one carrier that didn't have it. We got the iPhone. And we began this journey of the UnCarrier. It was a mantra. We were going to do the things that other carriers couldn't do, wouldn't do. We were going to do it. And it was based on a very simple principle, which is just listen to your customers. Listen to what they're telling you. Listen to what they want, and then deliver it. Listen to your employees. Listen to what your employees are telling you, and deliver it. And that's what we began to do. So we merged with Metro, and we started to grow. This business started to move at pace. We began these UnCarrier moves. Customers told us, we don't like contracts. We got rid of contracts. They told us, you know what, I'll hop on an airplane and fly to Europe, and I start getting hit with data charges. And I come back, and I have these massive bills. Got rid of the data charges. Gave them unlimited data. They're 30,000 feet flying in an airplane. They wanted to be able to text. They wanted to use Wi-Fi. We gave that to them. We gave them Netflix. About every 6 months, the business was delivering new innovation to the marketplace at a rate that we had never done before, doing something totally different, just listening to our customers. And it worked. We went from 33 million customers to we're now at 84 million customers. Think about that in the course of 7 years. We captured the majority of new customer growth for 7 years, and it's still continuing. That is a huge transformation for a business. Now, let's go back to 2012 one more time. We're an IT organization. We're in a shrinking business. What's one thing that you don't do when you're contracting and you're trying to conserve and be very careful about your investment? IT investment isn't going to sit at the top of your list. So we had an IT organization that now had to try and keep up with the business. And the view was, don't touch anything. Don't take risk. Risk is risking itself. If we start to implement new systems, when we have these large packaged software implementations, we owned everything that was out there. Large software that we tried to adopt to use it for all of these new ideas that were coming along. And it was all kind of spaghettied together, and we said, wow, this is going to be tough. Just to give you an idea of the situation that we were in, we were seeing a SEV1, P1 issue, we call them, which is essentially a customer-affecting issue, almost every day. Almost every day. We were touching our customers in a way that we didn't want and that they didn't want. When we had an issue, it took us about 800 minutes to recover from it. Why? Because we had this monolithic software stack that made it very difficult to put software out. So as the business is coming up with innovation, we're trying to move this massive software stack. We would do a release maybe quarterly. If it was a really good period, we might do it every couple of months. And we would do it in the middle of the night on a Saturday because on Sunday the stores open later, so we had more time to try and implement all of this software and make it work. In reality, what happened is we'd spend the next several days trying to recover. When you're not investing in your technology stack, what do you do when this innovation comes along? You start to throw people at the problem. We had a massive contract workforce. We said, all right, we're going to have to change. What are we going to do, and what are we going to do differently? And I will tell you, it's everything. From our people to our process to our technology, we needed to completely rethink how we use technology. So we began this journey. First thing that we did, we created a level of accountability. We took our development teams, we took our operating teams, we brought them together as a single team. So when you created something, you owned it. One team that did it all. What was amazing is in the course of 12 months, those P1 issues went from a daily occurrence down to maybe once a month in 12 months. We took our contract staff and reduced it by 50%. At the same time, we were improving performance and operations. We were able to reduce our overall cost as we went through this process. We built new telemetry. We started thinking differently. We started operating differently. Most importantly, we created the space for our teams to begin to innovate and think about the architecture. Where would we go next? That's what we did. We took these monolithic stacks and we said, we're going to break them down. And we started building cloud-native components that were microservices that we could put into containers. We could run them on the cloud. We could run them in our own internal environment. And we went from about 600 to 700 massive systems to we run about 75,000 containers every day today on just an average day. That's a huge change. And what's the impact on the business and our technology group? Instead of doing these massive releases on the weekends on a Saturday night, we wanted to change the philosophy. We said, you know what, we want to go during the busiest time in the middle of the day when we make these changes. And that's exactly what happened. We started doing deployments about 100 times a day with these small components that we could inject into the stack. And we could use blue-green deployments, we could use pipelines. What was interesting is everything that had been risky for the last couple of years was exactly the thing we shouldn't have been doing. What we needed to do was innovate, take risk, allow our teams to go operate out at the edge, to push boundaries and use new software. And we had an incredible impact on the architecture, on our teams, on our culture. We're not afraid to try new technology. We embrace it. So we started with operations. We stabilized the systems. Then we began to move into the architecture, began re-architecting all of our platforms. We put an API layer over the top. Why? Because it would allow us to move more quickly, innovate more quickly as an organization, and create independence for teams to operate. We said, okay, well, where do we go next with all this change that we've created? We said, you know what, we're not an IT organization anymore. We're a team that innovates. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring our product teams and our technology teams together. Why do it? One, to eliminate friction, to break down friction between teams and allow innovation to happen at the team level. So now you have technologists working with your product teams directly and driving new thought and new thought leadership and having accountability, again, all the way from the inception of an idea to the operation of it. So you're not just thinking about bringing a capability to customers, you're thinking about what it's going to be like to operate that capability once it's been deployed. We started this part of the journey in 2018, where we brought our teams together. And I thought I'd like to share just a little video to give you a bit of insight into what the culture is like at T-Mobile and what this has been for us. So let's see if we can get this to roll.
In 2013, we created an UnCarrier Manifesto.
It started with a really simple question. What do customers want? Listen to them and then give it to them.
It's not a promotion. It's a structural change in how this industry does business. That's what makes us different.
We have an integrated strategy that our customers love and our competitors cannot replicate.
And it's going extremely well. We are by far America's fastest growing wireless company. We now have the #1 most satisfied customers.
And we have changed wireless in the whole world for good.
We have to build our business to where things are going.
We aren't just a telco, we are a technology company.
It's all about IoT, it's all about software development.
All of which are expansion of products and services and require innovation at speed.
We want to be a world-class dev shop.
We want to get the best, the brightest, the most passionate people to work on our software.
Enabling our frontline care and retail organization with digital tools, giving customers access to our services and products through digital mediums was important.
We're able to use artificial intelligence to empower the representatives to solve our customers' questions faster and better.
We're taking things to the next level, and
We won't stop.
Well, what do you think? It's a real deal. We have changed a company, we have changed our technology, we have changed our culture. What you see on that video, when I go out and I meet with retail teams, I'll go to a conference, that's really what it's like. They are fanatics. And that is something that is incredibly difficult to replicate. And when you have teams that are willing to operate differently and think differently and push boundaries, you have something that I believe is a competitive advantage. And I think that's what we've built within our technology group. But we didn't do it by ourselves. So we've talked about what's happened within our business. I want to talk a little bit about the cloud journey that we've been on and how AWS has helped us along that journey. So I said at the beginning, we do about an UnCarrier move on average over the last 7 years. We do one about every 6 months. Now keep in mind, some of the ideas behind these UnCarrier moves came from a tweet that came from a customer that said they liked something, they didn't like something, us talking with our customers, ideas happening within the teams. Some of these ideas get executed in the course of weeks or even just a few months. So now you're running at pace. And what we needed to find were partners that could help us execute these types of moves. And one of the things that when we started on our cloud journey, we had a lot of questions. And one of the questions that to me was core, and one of the things I appreciate about Amazon and AWS is the focus on customers. So we operate a lot of data centers. There's resistance to us moving things into the cloud because we operate. Nobody's going to protect it better than we can. And if you're thinking about going into the cloud, something that you need to consider, who's your partner and how are they going to show up when you have issues? So all of these UnCarrier moves in some way have touched AWS, either because we're building UI, we're building microservices, we're running components of those out in the cloud. But the thing that matters is when we're doing these, AWS shows up. They show up in spades, and it's been phenomenal. It's been phenomenal support. So for companies that are thinking about making this journey, that's one of the things that you're going to want to consider. Now, when we look at our partners in this space, there are a couple of things that we need out of cloud providers. One is agility, which we've talked about, the ability to move quickly. One is scale, and one is cost. So when I think about scale, let me talk about scale for just a moment because it's an important idea and it's a challenge that we face as an industry. There are times throughout the year that we see this peak traffic, and if you're in the telco industry, you know what I'm talking about. Probably going to be the iPhone. Launch of the iPhone comes rolling around about every September, and carriers react to it and are trying to get that device out in front of their customers. What happens behind the scenes is we are for months planning and doing performance testing and trying to make sure that our systems are going to be ready to deal with this massive spike that's going to happen. It's going to happen at midnight when we turn the thing on, and then it'll begin to come down. But you have to design and be prepared for that event. Because if something goes wrong, it's not going to just be the immediate trying to recover. It's going to impact other systems. It's going to impact operations, whether it's care, retail. You're going to have upset customers because they're standing in line around a store for a reason, or they're getting up at midnight for a reason. They want this device. So carriers go through this period where we're trying to prepare. And the way that I would frame it up as I think about war rooms that we create in preparation for this event. And I look back over about the last 4 years. 4 years ago, we'd create a war room, midnight would show up, and teams would sit there, literally 1,000 people on a campus in different war rooms, trying to react to what was happening as this event played itself out. Were the systems stable? What did we need to recover? What's the telemetry telling us? And those war rooms could go on for days. Sometimes they might go on for a couple of weeks. Sound familiar if you're working for a carrier? Every year, as we begin to move more components into the cloud, and we've gotten better at how we scale and how we deal with it, I've watched those war rooms, and they've gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. So this year, iPhone comes rolling around. Apple decides we're going to change. We're going to do the digital launch at the same time that retail happens. So at 5 o'clock in the morning, we're going live. Now we have to have systems that can handle the load not just from the digital side, but also from the retail side, all at one time. Basically change the profile of what the load was going to look like. We brought food in. We had the war room stood up, 5 o'clock. Everything kicked off. We were ready to go. And by 10 o'clock in the morning, everybody had gone. It was the first time that we could go through an event of that kind of scale, and it became not a battle, but it became business as usual. And that says a lot over the course of a 4-year period when you think about the transformation that we've gone from. And core to that was how we use the cloud to help us with that scaling. Because when you're thinking about your internal systems, and we use both, we have large data centers, we use the cloud. When you're doing that scaling in your own data centers, you're basically setting the bar for the next 12 months. You're going to acquire the hardware, you're going to have more capacity that you need for some period of time. Hopefully you acquired enough and you were prepared for it. Where in the cloud, things that you had to do where you were planning months in ahead, you might plan a couple days in advance. It might be just a few hours. You're bringing that capacity up, and then you're able to bring that capacity back down, which leads to the cost component. When you think about what you're doing in on-prem and what you're doing in the cloud, your ability to manage costs becomes so much easier. And I tell you, when you can look at a system and know exactly what you're spending for compute for that application versus what you're doing internally, where you have all the soft costs that go around it, that's a serious challenge. So AWS helped us, not just with the iPhone launch, not just with UnCarrier moves, but as we've begun to move more and more into that space, we've become very comfortable in operating in the cloud and in our own data centers. But if we talk about our journey, and for companies that are thinking about making the move into the cloud, this wasn't an all or nothing proposition for us. Our approach to it was, we're going to try it. You think back 2012, we weren't doing a lot with innovation. Well, there was one exception. We had a team that we wanted to go rebuild our self-service experience. And so they were going to use the latest technology for UI, and we sent them on their way, and they came back and they said, hey, you know what, we'd like to try something. We'd like to try and build this out in the cloud for the first time. You know, we thought about it, and we said, all right, we're going to kind of set this aside and let this team go. There's going to be a lot of questions about it. And the teams got started, and they came back, and they said, you know, if we build this internally, it's going to be 3 months really before we get started, because we're going to have to procure the hardware, bring it in, provision it, just to get started. We can get going next week if we take it out to the cloud. And we said, all right, let's try it. This started for us literally as an experiment, our move into the cloud. So we built our My TMobile application on the cloud environment. We got moving, and there were a lot of questions for us. Is this a safe environment? Is this going to expose us to risks that we're just not aware of? So we had to begin to think about what it would mean to operate in this space with a company that, from our view, dealt with small websites, and they'd get small websites stood up and smaller businesses. We were a large enterprise. We had a lot at stake to begin to make a move like this. Well, it turns out it worked phenomenally. And what happened is we started moving more and more of our web properties into the cloud space. Eventually, we got comfortable enough that we moved our internal user interfaces into the cloud. So now we're operating in a cloud environment in combination with what we're doing on-prem, where we're talking to massive systems behind the scenes. As we went along on this journey, we began to realize, well, we need teams that can begin to think differently about how to operate in this space. So we had a small group that began to learn. We didn't know anything about it. So at the same time we were making the move and beginning to use the technology, we were starting to build expertise. I will tell you from an enterprise standpoint, the challenge in moving to the cloud, it turns out it wasn't technical. We started off with a VPN. We moved to a direct connect. We got better at building systems that were highly resilient. We didn't try to move massive platforms. We rebuilt systems to make them cloud native. so that we could run on-prem or we could run in the cloud. And we have a very large on-prem system. In fact, we have the largest Pivotal Cloud Foundry implementation in the world. So we're doing a lot on-prem. We have systems that we can move to these other spaces. The challenge turned out wasn't technical. The challenge was how an enterprise views a change like this. You had legal teams that were questioning, what's the contract look like? Procurement teams, how do you procure in the cloud space? Security teams, privacy teams. No one really understood it. And so there's kind of this wall of resistance when you begin a journey like this. And the question was, well, how do we work through that? Do you just try and push it through the enterprise? Well, we took a different approach. We brought the enterprise along for the ride. So to all of those other teams, they weren't in technology, and we said, why don't you become part of this and help us manage it? And so we essentially created a board that could make decisions about whether we did something in the cloud or whether we didn't. And kind of a fascinating thing started to happen. There was all this resistance, might be from operating teams, weren't comfortable with, what are these guys doing out here? I'm in charge of these systems, and I provide security for these systems. Then you begin to realize something. You have cloud providers that are investing massive amounts of resource into security and protection. As an enterprise, you have your security component, but can you scale to the level that they're scaling to? And then you start to get teams, whether it's procurement or legal, and they start to see what's happening in this space. And some of the biggest detractors become some of the biggest supporters of it. And that's exactly what happened. So then you move into this phase where the challenge is, how do you scale it? So I've gone from nobody really wants to go to this environment to now everybody wants to go into this environment. Wow, I can provision servers and I can do it in just a few hours. That's phenomenal. I want some of that. Now you got a different problem. Because everybody that's trying to get into it, how do you make sure that they're going to do it in a way that's secure, that's safe? And if you're not careful in this space financially, you're going to get yourself in trouble. What's interesting is we formed this small cloud team, and what they focused on, they were engineers, they figured out the technology piece of it, but then they started to become experts in the financial side. And what I watched were teams going through this transformation where they started to learn what's the most efficient way to use this space, what's technology that we could use to scale. So instead of building a massive cloud team, we formed a cloud center of excellence. And their job was to help train other teams on how to use a cloud, how to move into the cloud, how to do it safely, how to tag everything that you put in the cloud so that we could understand what was happening in this environment, how to build new technology that would allow us to grow and allow us to scale as we continued along this journey. So we're now running, I said, about 75,000 containers on any given day. We may scale that up as high as 300,000 containers. That's going to be on-prem as well as off-prem, 8,000 servers. Well, what's the impact that this has on your business? Because when you create that scale, you create new opportunity. You've allowed teams to begin to focus on new ways to innovate. And you find new ways to support different aspects of your business. In our case, talk about our B2B group for a moment. 3-4 years ago, the challenge our B2B teams had was they needed a network that enterprises would be comfortable putting their customers on or putting their employees on. Well, we had that. We'd accomplished that. So now the business began to move. We had the network. Now we needed to deliver the B2B experiences that business customers expect. What we did is we took the exact same approach, same architecture approach that we had taken with the consumer side, we began to apply to the business side. We'll build APIs. We'll build portals and platforms to allow businesses, whether they wanted to use what we had or they wanted to create it themselves, we would give them that optionality. And our B2B space, which was highly underpenetrated in the market, began to grow. In fact, it's grown 3x since 2015. We've won J.D. Powers in the B2B space for 3 years in a row. And I got to tell you, we're just getting started. This is a massive opportunity for us. So you think about the use of the cloud and what it means to you operationally, it also starts to have an impact on your business. Then you get into a phase which I like to call optimize it. You're constantly leaning forward in the space. It's evolving, it's moving very quickly, and you have to keep thinking about, if you're going to grow in this space, how are you going to do it efficiently? I think about it from the standpoint of optimizing. First, you're going to run services out there, basically replicating a system. Then you're going to start to break it down into containers. You have to make it easy to use. You have to make it easy for the development teams to use it. We did things on the container side. We weren't satisfied with the implementations that were out in the marketplace. So we said, you know what? We'll build our own. We built what we call Conductor, which is essentially an orchestration layer that we put into the cloud for our own developers to use to make it easy for them to do deployments. They didn't have to worry about all the configuration and all the other things that go along with moving into this space. So as we pushed on this next level, how do we govern it? And we have our COE, and we're now driving new innovation. We started thinking, well, where do we go next? And I think one of the fascinating spaces that we're beginning to move into is around AI. Thinking about how can you use AI, and I think about these massive environments, 75,000 containers and all these APIs, and the operational challenge that comes along with that. I think AI would be a fantastic tool to begin to use for things as fundamental as operations, looking at all the telemetry that you're gathering across the systems. Well, we actually began a journey with AI that also had an impact on the business. So one of the UnCarrier moves that we announced is what we call Team of Experts. And Callie Field, who heads up our customer service group, said, you know, what customers are telling us is they hate IVRs. Nobody likes an IVR. An IVR, it traps people in a system and tries to keep them from getting to someone that they can work with that can help solve their problem. To avoid the cost of having a human on the other side spend time trying to fix an issue, and we said, we're the UnCarrier. We're going to do it differently. We're going to take the IVR out of the picture. We're going to make it easy for you to connect to somebody that can help you. In addition to that, we're going to create what we call Team of Experts, which is, internally we call it techs. These are people that are going to be in a group, and they're always going to serve the same customers so that when you call in, you get to the same team of experts every time. They're highly trained. They can help you with device issues. They can help you with billing issues. Whatever it is that you need, they're going to take care of you, and it's going to be the same groups. Now, we had to do things with technology to help support that, like call routing, making sure that we could get the calls delivered where we needed them to get delivered to. But we also started to think, what could we do differently that would help the team of experts in that concept? And when you first look at it, and I think people thinking about customer service, they go, wow, that's going to be really expensive. And the whole industry has been built on trying to avoid that call going through. It's one of the reasons that carriers and cable companies have some of the lowest customer service rankings of any industry. It's getting trapped in that IVR. Now, we're not saying that we're not going to support you in other digital channels, whether it's on your device or on the web. We actually do have an IVR that you can do things through if you want to, but we're going to let you communicate with us in whatever way you want to, including a new way, which was asynchronous messaging. So it gave our team of experts the ability to have a conversation with customers in an asynchronous fashion. And so how could we begin to help supercharge all of this interaction that's happening? And we went to AI. And so we approached Amazon and we said, you know, we'd like to team up on this, and we'd like to think about how we're going to use AI to help empower the rep so that when a customer calls in, they're getting better information so that they can help that customer with that experience. And that's exactly what happened, including things like SageMaker to help us tag all of this data that we had to make it easier to apply AI. And so what our data scientists did is they began to use that platform, and today we're providing our front-end groups with about 1.5 million insights every day so that when you call up as a customer, they have information sitting there to help in that conversation, help make it easier and help improve that customer experience. So it's a concept from the business with new technology applied to make it even better. All right, so as I think about what we've been doing in the cloud and how we're operating differently as a company and how we think about our employees, one of the other areas that we started to go into was we wanted our teams to experience innovation. We want them to be innovators. And in 2012, we kind of avoided anything that was open source. We weren't going to use those tools. Who was going to support it? And then we began to go through this transition. We said, all right, well, we'll start working with open source. So I'd say we became observers of open source. And then as it went along, we started to become contributors, and we encouraged teams to be contributors to it. We're trying to change our workforce. We wanted them to be empowered, and to be able to go and drive new innovation. And one of the ways we felt we'd do it was by getting involved in the open source community. So there were a couple of things that we needed to solve for that we thought, well, these would be fantastic tools for other companies as they're moving into the cloud space. One of those is around security. Cloud providers have a great deal of security, right? They're putting a lot of resource and a lot of investment into it. But how do you as a company, when you move into that cloud space, make sure that your teams, as they're deploying software into the cloud, how do you know that they're doing it in a secure way? Well, what our team came up with is what we call Pack Button. It's essentially a system that is constantly scanning the cloud ecosystem. It's looking for where configurations have been set up incorrectly, where there's some security exposure, and we can do things like set policies to automatically shut it down, to flag it, so that we have a constant scan and view of what's happening in our cloud space. It's a great innovation. And we said, you know what, this isn't something that just T-Mobile needs. Other companies are going to need it. So we open sourced it. And we have other companies that are contributing to it. And I would encourage anyone that is moving into this space, take a look at it, and we'd love to have you come join. Or T-Vault, when you think about development, where are teams putting secure secrets and how are they manage it? So we worked with HashiCorp, and we built an API layer sitting on top of now what's T-Vault, so that we could manage security elements, again, to make it easier for our developers to focus on what they do best, which is write software, not worrying about how they're managing the secrets that they need to use, we need to build into systems. And then as we think about optimization, we started looking at, well, what's coming, what else could we do in this cloud space? And we started looking at serverless, and we thought, well, this is going to be interesting. What can we do in serverless? And one of the things that we wanted to solve for was to make it easy for developers to begin to use the serverless environment. So we came up with a product called Jazz, and again, we open sourced it. Very simply, it's used to allow teams to build without having to worry about all the configuration and all the overhead and all the management that goes along with it. And when you think about the efficiency of using serverless, it creates another dynamic when you put the cloud together and you've got to deal with cost and you've got to deal with automation. It's another great tool that we felt, you know, this isn't just going to be for T-Mobile. We think other companies are going to use this as well. So if you get a chance, go out and take a look at it. And if I can geek out for just a moment, I hate putting architecture slides up in a conversation like this, but I couldn't help it. If you look at the Jazz architecture and you go to the left, we're basically created an interface that's very simple and easy for developers to use and to integrate. And then we have a microservices layer that's extensible. So if you think about large architecture and platforms and integrating this with your enterprise, we've created an environment that you can do it with, and it's overlaying all of the AWS services that are out there today. So again, it's the reason I put this up here is to invite others to come join us in what we think is going to be another fantastic tool. All right, so we've talked about T-Mobile, our journey as a business, our journey as a technology team. We've talked about how our culture has changed. The question is, where we go from here? If you were to wrap it all together, it has been an absolutely unbelievable 7 years to see what this company has been able to do. But what happens next? And this question comes up to me all the time, which is, you know what, you guys just launched first nationwide 5G network. What's happening next? What's the innovation that's going to come out of this? And I've worked in product long enough to know that's almost an impossible question to answer. Because what happens when you create the landscape for innovation to happen, you see new companies and new entrants. Who would have thought? The example we always talk about is Uber. Who would have thought 10 years ago you'd get into a stranger's car, they'd give you a ride somewhere, you'd pay them at the end, you didn't even have to take your wallet out to do it? That's pretty incredible. I had an experience a couple of weeks ago that I thought was relevant to this as I was thinking about what is this all going to mean. And it was an opportunity to fly with a helicopter crew, basically a life flight crew. And they would go out and pick up critical patients and they'd take them to the hospital. And I go out and we have no idea if a call is going to come. I've been invited to go on this ride along essentially. And I climbed in, or I met them, and within 30 minutes, a call comes in. And I just kind of watched. I sat up at the front with the pilot, and I watched what was happening, and it was incredible. Within 10 minutes of the call, the pilot's in the air. He's already connected with the FAA. He has to deal with the weather around the Seattle area at 3 different points, because the weather's changing rapidly, the point at which we're taking off, the place that we're going to, and where we're ultimately going to land, and it's constantly changing. And he has to do all of that. At the same time, he's flying this machine. And here was what was amazing about it. One, he wasn't touching any of the controls. He was working on an iPad, and that iPad was calculating for him. He was just putting inputs into it. The weight of all the passengers, the distance we had to go. It was sending the communication to the FAA to get the clearance to make the flight. And I looked at that and I thought, you know, we use this Uber example all the time, but here's a real critical life and death situation where technology is fundamentally changing our lives. And to watch a machine fly itself through the air, letting a pilot focus on what's happening in the back of the helicopter with the patient talking to the control tower, trying to get into the flight pattern, it was amazing. And that for me was the moment when I said, what we are about to embark on with technology is going to be nothing short of life-changing. I think we are going into a period, when you look at 5G, you look at the cloud, and all that technology coming together, where we will have a landscape that is fundamentally going to change lives. Thank you. I think we're going to do, I'm not sure what's next. I think we're going to do a meet and greet after this. I was also told there are pieces of paper on your chairs. You might want to look on the back of that. I think there were prizes that they wanted to give out as well, I think. Don't hold me to it. It's kind of a last-minute request when I came up here. So have a wonderful rest of the convention.